Xuel, thank you for taking the time and agreeing to talk with Kevin and I. We're excited to get to know more
Mm-hmm.
about you, and we're excited about the event that we're gonna do
Mm,
time soon with the community night.
of course.
I wanna start by just talking a little bit about your history. I've known you
Mm,
for so many years.
right.
When I first met you, you were still
Michelle.
a software engineer. I was not gonna say that.
But that's right.
We can
Yeah.
also talk about your name change.
Yeah.
You were in the tech industry. You're a software
Right.
engineer, and then you went through this transformation, and
Mm,
you wanted to do something else.
exactly.
So I'm curious to hear about the genesis of that. What made you
Mm,
go through that, and what made you want to go through the therapeutic
mm.
re-education and like changing your career and entire life because of that.
Oh, okay. I think some people desire to be in a corporate job for some time, the stability and the kind of grind suits them. But I think for me, in the beginning, I knew I wasn't going to be there for long. So it wasn't that hard to pivot actually for me because I went in with the mindset that this is going to be my experimental years in a big company in San Francisco. At that time, I wanted to become like a film writer. And I thought I'm gonna get my material by living in San Francisco and I'm gonna film school, blah, blah, blah. But then, shortly after I immersed myself to the San Francisco Bay Area, I realized that the art form of human interaction intrigued me more than anything else. I was very fortunate to surround myself with some people that became actually some of my realest friends or the first batch of real friends I've had since I moved to the States as a teenager. I think in college I was quite a nerd, very socially anxious. I was still very much in international student mode. I didn't know how to fit in the culture, the society. But then in San Francisco, because it's so creative and innovative, everyone's so exciting and unique, right? I felt very empowered to try new things here, learn about all kinds of practices and fun stuff people do. So it was during those years that I got into creative work, self development work, going to authentic relating, going to excited dance. I think those were the times that you met me there too. Yes, going to fun dancing festivals in California. And then I also started therapy, started dating a non Chinese person for the first time in my life, going to couples therapy. And then it was during those sessions I was like, oh, I think being a therapist could be really cool. I like working with people, I like helping people with their lives going deep. And then I think also during those years, I went to Burning Man for the first time, for a few times. And of course, the culture of Burning Man really inspired me and rejuvenated me. And that was like the start of my little spiritual awakening. I was very into this teacher called Ramdas that's already passed. But I remember going to work, taking the bus in the morning and listening to Ramdas podcast, him talking about his like psychedelic years and then meeting his guru in India and then becoming from like somebody to nobody. And I was like, I want to become Ramdas. And I was like, how do one become Ramdas? I can't just sign up for a course or a training to be a Ramdas, right? I have to do my own thing. So Ramdas was a psychologist in Harvard for some years. I was like, maybe I'll be a psychotherapist, right? It feels like a good next step. So it's funny, that was my impetus. But of course, as I switched from a software engineer to being a therapist, a lot of things shifted. I realized that was just the first step. And what really interested me as I become a therapist was still like going to the depth of human psyche and witness how we can open up, how we can transform from a more restricted place to a more heart open, loving place. And I realized that I love one-on-one work, but I also really love group work. And because so much of like Western self-development is so individualist and so private, and I come from a culture, I mean you guys too, right? That collective community bonding connection is so central, and I couldn't imagine how we can heal without community. So I began both like doing one-on-one therapy internships and community facilitation. And I really allowed myself to experiment with the different events I put on because I thought it was through putting on different events that I would know what kind of facilitator I am. So it's funny how it led me to the stage I am today. Like today, I'm like a part-time therapist, part-time facilitator, part-time like internet writer, or just like a little witch for my community member. And I could see how I was experimenting with all those modalities throughout my path. And it was the people around me that really supported me and motivated me and empowered me to win on these practices that I'm still doing today.
Yeah. Yeah. This is a beautiful story that I keep hearing about how the city have gave the environment for those experiences to come to life, for you to connect with people that you may not have connected with them if you didn't live in the city. So I'm always grateful for the city here that we live in, for all those possibilities. So what I'm hearing was the transitioning was very desirable for you. So you didn't, did you have a moment where like you were maybe like scared or anxious? Oh, like I have the stable job now, and then now I'm gonna transition to this complete unknown. Was there any tension or anxiety around that, or what happened? What happened then?
It giggles me because I think the people around me was more stressed out about that than I did. And my ex at the time was especially anxious. He was like, "Oh, you're not gonna have six-figure software engineer and salary anymore. And we're gonna have different income levels. How we're gonna, do things together?"
Ooh.
So that was like, did you just like me because we earn the same, or do you like me because I'm a very growth-driven person? So that relationship crumbled, of course, in the end. But we're still really good friends. But it was also interesting because my pivot overlapped with COVID. So it was an interesting time in my life, but also with the world, because we were all going through so much uncertainties and big changes in terms of our lifestyle, in terms of our like career path, in terms of the way we connect with each other, gather. And I was just like, okay, bring it on, like change and uncertainty. Voila, I've already made my decision. There's no going back. My manager at the time did like phone me after I quit my job and then COVID happened. He said, "Do you want to come back? Do you still want this job?
Aw.
Do you need the salary?" And I was like, "I appreciate it. I'm still thought about, but I think I've made my decision and I'm a committed person now."
Wow,
Yes.
wow. That's such a nice thing for
Yeah.
your manager to do that.
Yeah, I know. He was sweet.
Yeah,
I still think about him.
yeah, yeah. I did not plan to talk about this, but since you mentioned it earlier, you also said when I first met you, you were Michelle, and now you go by the name Xuel.
Yeah.
What happened? What prompted you? I'm assuming what I heard there was a couple of years. It
Yeah.
was a lot of a phase of transitioning or like phase of change.
Yeah.
Did that happen at the same time?
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Yeah, I think there was like at least 3, 4, 5 years of intense personal rebirth. Yeah. What prompted the name change was I really felt at the moment around 2021, 2022, that the Michelle was so associated with the version of me that was chasing after an American dream. That I grew up in China and then I took on the name Michelle as a teenager in school because that was a cool thing and we were all listening to American music. I was in a rock band with my best friends and we all spoke English with each other, of course also Chinese. So Michelle is like this part of me that fantasized about being American. And after arriving here and then spending so many years establishing myself, getting a job, having my community in California, I realized that was only a part of me. And then it was a part of me that was trying to fit a box of an image of success and popularity. And then during the COVID years, while I was in Hawaii also with Kevin, it was a really good time, an incubator that helped me expand myself, connect more with land, with nature, with like more being part of myself, less doing part of myself. And that actually helped me connect to my ancestry a little bit more, even though I was in Hawaii, but the land there was so spiritual and has such a lovely grandmother energy. It was there that I felt first time in my life connected to my ancestors. I felt called to deepen my connection with China in a certain way. Yeah, it's interesting. And then I started going back to China every summer since then in like 2020. And then in 2022, I felt that I want to use a name that represents this version of me that blends my Chinese roots and my California becomingness. And I also didn't want to use my real Chinese name because spiritually, my real Chinese name is very heavy with water energies, snow, icicles, or midnight. And then I am heavy with water already in my bazi, Chinese astrology. Sorry, we're getting a little metaphysical here. But was carefully thought after. I want something that's non-binary a little bit. And some Chinese come from my Chinese name, but also emphatic and easy to write and easy to remember. So Xuel was like combining Xueling and Michelle. Voila.
Amazing.
Yeah.
We were talking about Hawaii a little bit before the podcast recording went official, and my then partner Tina and I were joining you as part of this creative community house that you brainstormed all your own and such. And we're going back like to COVID times. It's not a great situation to be in. We all feel a little trapped. There's a lot of quarantining and such and uncertainty in the world. And Tina and I were in these beginning steps in the serious part of our relationship where we're living together for the first time and such. And something about your offering just provided a sense of possibility, and I really resonate with that nurturing energy that you mentioned. It seemed like the land and the ocean kind of held us, and it allowed Tina and me to sink into our relationship, and just we were still working jobs, obviously. We were still like figuring that balance out, but we were able to see, what's it like to be present with each other? What's it like to be present with others? And you and Jonathan Dubin and Justin, and you were great housemates and community to be with at the time. So thank you. I don't think I really got to thank you for that experience. Yeah.
Thank you for saying yes, because it was such an experiment. I couldn't believe I imported my friends from mainland US to Hawaii to live with me. And at the time, we had no furniture, right? Everything was from scratch. It was so experimental. Yeah. It's so special.
But that's one of the qualities that I admire about you is that you have this capacity for experimentation and just going for it. I know, Gio, you mentioned one of the events that stood out to you with Xuel is the Sad Party. And I also have that experience where...
Oh, you guys were core members, yes, for those events.
Can you describe what a Sad Party is?
Yeah.
And just like, where was the impetus for that idea?
Right. That started in 2018, and I remember I got inspired after attending Emotathon in Burning Man at Naked Heart Camp. And Emotathon was like a 3-hour journey of just like the woman will emote to the men in the group, and they will like yell and scream and cry and tell stories, blah, blah, blah. Sometimes they even do some physical contact. And it was very cathartic and new to me that I felt very inspired by that format, but I didn't want it to be, or I wanted to borrow it or get inspired by it, but not constrict it to the woman emoting to the man format. So Sad Party was birthed out of that inspiration. And it was also a time in my life that I was battling with a lot of my own emotional processing and waves, coming from a childhood of a lot of emotional neglect and suppression. And I was in the beginning of my years finally doing therapy, understanding myself. And I realized like in our society, there's really rare spaces where we could express ourselves so authentically, where those sad, angry, or more raw parts of ourselves could be seen or could be heard or could be met. And of course, I didn't have the capacity to do group therapy, but I felt like you didn't need to do group therapy for a group of people to be in a space together where your emotions are welcome, where we can take off our masks of small talks and needing to be happy, needing to be successful in order to know each other. How about we just meet each other in our more sad moments or moments where behind the mask, the more messy parts of us? And then I think looking back, that idea and that whole project right now, talking about it, it still feels so like avant-garde. Like I still haven't seen anything like it. I don't know. Like I've attended so many events and workshops since then, but I'm like, wow, nobody does those kind of things, because it does require a lot of containment for the facilitator, for the space, and a lot of trust between the people that's coming in. But somehow, maybe because the time we were in, the community we've already had, and the audacity I had to just do that and consistently, we would have 3 hours of starting with some authentic relating, people sharing about what's going on in their lives, sharing more tender, vulnerable stories of themselves. And then we will go into a circle, like a psychodrama towards the end, in which one person will be the center of the circle and emote to the whole group, and then invite some group members to be role or a participant in their emoting, to sit there in place of their father or ex-girlfriend or grandmother or just like a listener, and everyone else would sit in a circle and hold space for them. So it was also a little bit like family constellation / psychodrama / I don't know, like a very tribal gathering in a circle, right? But it was in a living room of my 6 people community house, very San Francisco. And in the end, it will morph into a cuddle puddle, people just like mingling and being more soft spaces. So that was a sad party. And I think we did at least like 5 to 10 of them in those years. And it was quite bonding and quite special. And I still think about those days. It required a lot of energy for me to host it, which is why I'm not doing it now, because I'm like, I don't know if I still have it within me. Xuel in her 30s is a little different from Michelle in her 20s. We required some of that edge and fierceness to hold that space. But I really felt like it catapulted me into my healer, facilitator, visionary career that I've carved. Yeah.
Yeah, it's one of those things where I totally agree. It was, I don't want to fangirl too much, but it was a revolutionary practice. And one that I agree hasn't boomed into other places. Seems like it's a practice to your unique vision. And I couldn't even imagine what it would be like to try to facilitate a practice like that, because just to have the collective emotional swell. I can't even handle my own emotional swell for myself. It's like, how do you do it with a group of people? But you strike me as a person who runs toward those emotional interactions. Correct me if I'm wrong. It's you welcome it, you embrace it, you allow it, you invite it.
Yeah.
And have you always had that sort of like spark or interest with emotional interactions, or is that something that came later in your life? How did that come about?
Great question. No, I felt that it was definitely cultivated, and then very much it was the thing I needed for myself that I started to do for others as a way to give permission to give it to myself. Because I grew up with a very controlling and a little bit aggressive mother. And later on, I started to identify as a neurodivergent, highly sensitive kid now. But at that time, I didn't even have that language. But I did remember as a kid, I was super sensitive, super emotional. But I felt they were just so suppressed and even laughed at. So as an adult, I was seeking for a channel in which I could make sense of all these volatility and emotional waves inside me. And it was through giving permission or holding space for other people in those relational spaces where I feel like, okay, if I hear you talking about your messy parts, then maybe you will accept me for talking about my messy parts. It was a little transactional, but it became very healing for myself and for all the people I came in contact with. And the tendency to run towards emotion was, I would say, it was also an inclination to go through the dark storm so I can run towards the light. I couldn't see another way out but to embrace the emotions that was just coming one after the other for myself. And indeed, I think over the years, right now at this age, I feel like I've softened a little. I've learned to not get stuck and indulge in my emotional waves or believe in the emotional stories, but to trust the emotions as just sensations that will flow in and out of us. Before, I feel like I was craving that kind of emotional work and kind of enjoying the ocean, right? Now I could see that I've learned the ability to swim. I've learned the ability to sail. And I could choose to have calmness and tranquility, or I could choose to have intensity and passion. And before I didn't have those skills, so I didn't know how I could sail through the intensity and reach tranquility. Now it feels it's an option. If I have the taste and appetite for some emotional work and juiciness, then we can embrace it together, either with myself or with the clients that I'm working with. And then if they really feel like they're ready for that, then I can hold space for that. But at the same time, I also feel like there's a lightness I have right now I didn't have before, which is you can let the weather come in your internal landscape and know that sun will always be there and the sun will show up after the storm, believing, oh my God, I'm caught up in the storm and this is it. Yeah.
Okay, I want to follow up on this specific point that you're mentioning, because you just said that it's a skill set that you had to learn. My question is about, what if I have a close friend or a family member who, as a third party, who I know them deeply, I can see them living in that emotional story. What would be your advice for, because the story that I have, I don't know if it's about a skill set, because a skill set is something you can learn, right? You need to have the desire to learn it. Some people spend their entire life maybe stuck in that space. Maybe this is just a projection, or this is how I see them. But if I would to support someone who's still in that space, what would you recommend that I would do?
Yeah. As you're asking, this metaphor that my colleague was talking about the other day came to me, which is imagine those like emotional reactions, either of yours or someone else, is basketball. And then if you try to bounce the basketball, then it will bounce back even harder, right? But then the way to calm the basketball is to just observe it, because it will fall to the ground and the gravity will take care of it. And it will have less of the bounce, and then eventually it will come back to peace. So I feel like as facilitators or space holders or as a supportive friend, the more stronger reactions we have towards someone else's emotional reactivity, the more they will feel like a need to come back at us, act out or respond or react, right? The more we just hold it with some mindful compassion, let them do their thing, be a compassionate presence. And most importantly, sometimes the support comes from a nervous system co-regulation. If we're calm and if they can sense that we're calm, accepting and loving, they will do the thing they need to do, which is venting, which is emoting, which is complaining. And then at the end, they'll be like, okay, I'm done now. You listen to me, you heard me, and I feel better because I see another person that's like listening to me, understanding me. A child cries louder if the parents are ignoring them, right? If they sense the parents are responding to them, they're like, okay, we don't need to cry as loud. So I feel like so what we do as friends, be a good listener and don't try to fix them or inject our needs and desires for them to be different. Yeah.
That's a good feedback. I want to give you a fun fact about the Sad Parties. I think I've been, maybe every time I had a sad party, I would always go to those sad parties. I remember the house was in Haight, right? And there was like a big living room.
Lower Haight.
Yeah. And I remember that one of the things that I used to do in those sad parties, if I would, what's the nicest way to say this? I would bring dates to those sad parties as a way to calibrate to see if they're able to handle all those emotions.
Wow. That's wow, I can't believe you will do that to your dates. That's so intense.
It was definitely not a first date.
Okay.
I would never bring someone to a first date, but let's say it's a third date or a fourth date, and I would already told them about like ecstatic dance or like other things. So I would tell them about like sad parties,
Wow.
and then I would bring them, and I would just see, because to your point, I think we don't have a lot of spaces. And generally speaking, what we think of negative feelings like sadness or anger or whatever, it was just like a lab for me to see how this person is when they're being asked, or like they're facing those feelings, how would they react. So it was not it was just like a lab for me to be in that space. So that's just a
Wow.
fun fact.
And how did they react? How did
Um,
they respond? Were they freaked out? Did they run
Well,
away?
I remember the last party that I went was maybe February 2020. It was right before COVID, literally right before COVID. That was, I think, the last one that you did.
Yeah.
And we left after 10 minutes. We literally left after the first exercise.
Okay.
She's, hey, I don't, can we just leave? And we left.
Okay.
So, yes.
Sorry for that date. But now it's not for everyone, for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
I want to ask you a deep question here. What is forgiveness? I was trying to be jokey there, but
Ah. It's a simple thing, but a hard thing, right? Yeah. Forgiveness is let go of the fantasy of a better past. Yeah. And then you can clear the plate, start anew, focus on the present and the future. Yeah. I think that's the definition I've heard and I really like. Yeah. But I also feel like forgiveness really requires some authenticity, because a lot of us try to do forgiveness, or maybe we try. You can't do it with a mask or with a template. It's the kind of thing you either feel it in your heart or it's surface level. Yeah. And it's the kind of thing that sometimes we think we do it for other people, but actually we do it for ourselves. Because as we let go of the fantasy of the better past of a relationship or a situation, we give ourselves the opportunity to be in the present moment, to let go of that grievances, resistance, vindictiveness that hold us tight. Yeah.
What if sometimes the fantasy is so strong,
Yeah.
especially when someone has a traumatic past, that they genuinely want to have a better past.
Then it sounds like they might want a better future than a better past. Yeah. Because the thing we cannot change is the past. Yeah. And it's easy to stay in that fantasy, because a lot of times in those fantasies, we also stay in victimhood. And that's a comforting place to be, to stay in victimhood, so we can blame other people, we can blame ourselves. And I feel like it's the kind of thing we cannot force ourselves to release. You are ready for forgiveness when you're ready. And if you're not ready, then that's also a choice. But the thing I'm trying to maybe support people with the event that I'm putting on is to give a space for those people who are already ready, but lacking some encouragement, lacking some community support, to see those options more clearly, the option of forgiveness or the option of holding on to the past. Yeah.
Gio and I are just in deep thought, letting that sink in right now.
I know, it's a deep topic, and it's not something we usually talk about, for sure.
I'm gonna put you on the spot, Kevin.
Oh, no.
I'm curious to hear what is forgiveness for you, because I noticed when you were asking the question, you were half joking, and I have a story that half joking was a way to cover some like either curiosity or anxiousness around the topic. So I'm curious, what does forgiveness mean to you?
So I'm noticing two answers come up for me. There's an urge to address the awkward jokiness on my part, which was related to trying to transition to a question about Xuel's event coming up and wanting to do that in a lighthearted fashion and also being caught very off guard by the response, the very profoundly deep response that
You think I was gonna give you a jokish answer? What are you thinking? And do you even know me?
I was not thinking, I will admit. And my heart was touched at hearing the term or the phrase, the fantasy of a better past, because I don't think I've ever heard it quite like that before. And as Xuel was talking, and it was just like allowing those words to sink in and recognizing, oh, I definitely relate to that and feel the sort of the self-perpetuating victimhood of feeling that fantasy. And also just like the stuckness of wanting to get out and not allowing myself to get out or keeping myself in the box. And the story I have of that is I do that because it's comfortable. It's what I know. And if I open the door and just allow myself to lean into the reality of what it is without trying to change it, the basketball, that's scary to me for some reason. But then I also get stuck in the self-perpetuating victimhood box, and that sucks too. So I'm caught in this rubber band and not quite sure how to just crawl out of it or roll out of it. Now I'm like wobbling along, and maybe playfulness is part of it. I don't know.
Yeah, that's really real. I could feel the unsureness as you were talking about, and the heaviness that comes from confronting our victimhood. And that's a hard place to really look at. Yeah, and thank you for just naming it for yourself. I do feel like playfulness is a medicine. And my intention with a lot of these events is like, if I show up in a person that could do this in a slightly humored but also grounded way, and then show other people that it doesn't have to be such a gut-wrenching, hard, emotional, heavy work, but it's something we could just bring it into our lives with some compassion, with some truth, and then that's the medicine. Yeah. Right now I really believe in like effortless medicine rather than hard medicine. You have to try so hard to forgive, and then forgive myself, forgive the people that wronged me, and betrayal. Family. Yeah, because as we're all becoming older, three of us of good friends, going through life stages, right? There's a certain sense of, I'm feeling a certain sense of ease and surrender to forgive the people that I used to really hold them in my heaviness, because I maybe have gained more skills and resources for myself, so it's easier to share that generosity and love and tolerance for other people. And maybe I have also experienced more pain and crisis and hardships, so it's also easier for me to empathize with other people's hardships and crisis who made them do the kind of things they do. And as I've realized, I've done some stupid things myself. So I wonder if that's the same for you guys, as let's say you've grown older, you found some ease with understanding or empathizing other people, where they come from. Yeah.
So this is like a question and an answer, because I'm curious, do you think of forgiveness as an internal work that I get to do? I love what you said, that you do the forgiveness for yourself, not for others. But is that an internal experience that I go through? Is there a part of it that is verbally expressed toward that person, toward that situation? Because for me, I feel a lot of the forgiveness work that I do is more internal. I made peace with a lot of things in my life,
Yeah.
but I don't verbalize this externally. And I feel that part is like a very precious gift if I were to do it. Like that's taking the relationship to a different level. So usually my forgiveness experience is just me going through that internal process and not externally verbalizing it.
Yeah. Yeah. I think forgiveness foundation is internal work. No matter if you do it relationally or not, it starts with internal work. And I feel like the relational aspect of forgiveness is the gift that you get to choose whether you want to give it to other people or not. And then even if you don't give the gift verbally or explicitly, just having done the internal work, you've already given a gift for yourself. And what I've observed for both myself and the people that's doing this work is after you've surrendered the fantasy of a better past and giving that gift for yourself of letting go, and then you really allow yourself to sink in and feel those emotions, you will actually start to feel a certain burden lifted out of your emotional field or relational field that will automatically transform your relationship either with this person or some other people or other areas of your life, even if you don't do the communication explicitly. Because I think there's just so much magic with so much burden we carry with those like hooks, emotional and relational hooks, that we need them to do something in order for set ourselves free without realizing that we could set ourselves free by doing that inner work. And when we have set ourselves free, we realize that the world is free. We can do whatever we want. We can love as we want. We could forgive as we want. We could give the gift of generosity or compassion as we want. So what I've noticed personally is when I did my forgiveness work with my parents, and then I moved back to China, I lived with them on and off for a few months here and there. And I'm still so shy, so awkward, and so not used to communicate with my parents emotionally, explicitly, because we're Chinese people and we don't say anything too explicitly. I noticed a shift in the way we relate to each other. And I could tell it came from me. I could tell it's because I released them from needing to show up for me in a certain way in order for me to feel their love and presence in my life. And I was just like, oh my God, this is so much easier. I don't have to do the very awkward and weird. I might do it one day when I'm up for it, of work, telling them, I forgive you. But that will be weird, right? Because they wouldn't even understand that, what do you need to forgive me with? Did I do anything wrong? So much of this is my internal story and fantasy, how they've wronged me, how they did not provide me with the love and attunement I needed, how much they suppressed me, which is a true story, but also not a story they could understand. So the forgiving part is so much about me doing that work, understanding myself, understanding them, so I could set myself free. And then doing that also allow me to see their version of the story too, how it's like to have a single child, their only daughter, who they don't understand, grew up in a totally different generation, so yearning for freedom and adventure, rebellious, and then decide to move to the States by herself alone, and how much, let's say, grief or confusion or anger or just like overwhelm they had during those difficult years raising me and me fighting with them. Yeah.
Yeah. I am very excited about the event. I'm hoping that we'll dig deeper in the forgiveness topic. We will publish the event date with the podcast notes. But I want to transition to another topic that you also just touched upon. Actually, we have this recurring theme. A lot of the facilitators in our community, all either immigrant or first generation immigrants. And two things I want to ask to follow up. How do you feel your Chinese heritage played a role in what, like, those events you're facilitating?
Wow. Yeah.
And then the other one, so I want to talk about this specific thing first, and then we can transition to this. So I'm very curious, when you went back home and you realized that shift between with your family, I'm always curious, how would language play a role in this? I know the version of me that speaks Arabic does not have the same capacity of the version of I speak in English. I'm the same person, but the way that I went through my life experiences through the English vocabulary is very different than the one that I went through my Arabic vocabulary. So do you think, for example, it's just a question, if your family to speak English, do you feel like you would have more tools or things for you
Yeah,
to
yeah.
shift that
That's
with
such a
them?
great question. And I think the reason why you have facilitators as immigrants is because you're an immigrant and then you attract people who are like this. We are definitely more attuned to differences, inclusivity, attuned to how we experience maybe injustice in the society or lack of freedom or whatever it is. I really feel like that lend me a certain appetite for shared humanity and compassion for all those community members around us, no matter if it's like San Francisco local or immigrants or expats or transplants from other parts of the states. I think having gone through the immigration experience myself, I know how hard it is to feel out of place. I know how hard it is for to find belonging. It's hard for everyone to find belonging in this day and age anywhere, right?
Yeah.
Even if you're grown, if you grew up here, but it's extra hard to have to learn a different language, to have to adapt to a culture, to have to establish a new family far away from your existing family. So there's a tenderness I hold to other people knowing that struggle. And then to your question about language, I think that's such a fascinating question that I've just started to have some more grasping about. Because it wasn't until recently I started to experience this seamless transition in my brain between the bilingual languages I speak. I used to speak almost only English, and then I put away my Chinese brain and side part of me for a long time. And then during my years moving back and reconnecting with my family, I started to speak Chinese again. And I could tell for those years there was a split inside me, the English part and the Chinese part. The English part is emotionally savvy, articulate, communicative, authentic, blah, 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 professional. It's the adult. It's the cognitive brain and that learn this language in academic environments instead of, let's say, in those like sticky, murky early childhood development years, right? Versus my Chinese part is super emotional. It's super sensitive. It's hard to find the precise words that could articulate my emotion, but it could feel that emotion just by, for example, hearing some songs and being those atmosphere. When I went back to China on and off for the past few years and hearing my parents talk in Chinese, I could just feel some crazy digestion that was going on in my body. I was writing about this the other day, that I would have bloatiness and dizziness, sleepiness every time I went back. And it wasn't until recent month, this year, that it dissipated. And I realized, wow, I started to talk to myself in Chinese again. I started to talk to my Chinese friends who I know they can hear Chinese in Chinese, even if they would respond back to me in English. And I was like, that's new. And I really feel that when I was working, now I'm working with Chinese clients in my psychotherapy practice in Chinese. And I could really feel that when we're speaking in Chinese, the inner child part of them is more online. And there's more just like sensitivity and tentativeness because it's associated to that part of us, those immigrants, that's early childhood, right? And I feel like this kind of work requires a bridge when we are bilingual and immigrant. We probably will learn it first in English speaking spaces because that's where it's promoted, it's taught, and that's where we get together and learn these kind of things. But I really encourage everyone, including myself, to convert it into a mother tongue practice for ourselves. For example, 1 month ago when I had my birthday, I wrote a letter of love to myself from my 31-year-old self to a child part of self. And I started writing English and then it changed into writing in Chinese. And I just started crying, of course. I talked to myself as how I would talk to the younger parts of me, how I would soothe her as a parental figure, as a sister, as an elder. And it's hard to find those opportunities for those of us who speaks different languages to do that. But then we could do that for ourselves through just internal dialogue, through affirmations. Yeah, I feel you. It's hard. And it's so nice too. And it's also a gift we have to be able to cross cultures and cross roles and parts. and we get to be those bridges in our different affinity space.
Yeah.
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 Can I? You're willing to share?
Of course.
What was something you told your younger self? Are you? If that's totally private, that's totally.
No. I almost forgot, but I could recall. I was just affirming her of how I understand that she feels so deeply, and she had to go through a lot of moments where she felt so abandoned, so alone, and it was hard for her. And now I really want to show her that we're on the other side of the tunnel and that we have the skills to love ourselves and love everyone. And we finally arrived. I'm going to cry now. But I really feel like I finally arrived at a place where I feel like she really wants me to be. Because I feel like my childhood, there's a part of my childhood that was very creative. And then the creativity was taken away, or I entered a more chaotic teenage, early adulthood phase through school and immigration. And now I feel like, oh my God, I really want to reassure her the creativity is coming back. The light of my spirit is coming back. And she will be so delighted to see me that way. And I really value that part of her that is outrageously, effervescently creative and imaginative. And I think I do have a really good relationship with my inner child now, because I really see that a lot of my career right now is driven by her crazy ideas and magical fantasies of how we can be in a room and cry together and love each other as adults. So there was a lot of that letter just appreciating her and thanking her for never losing her spark, never losing her magical thinking, and how I want her to continue to be a guide for me. And now I finally have the skills of an adult to support her with structure, with communication, with financial foundations. She can be more safe and she could be more free, and we can be a team. So I want to have my inner child as a divine child, as also a core part of my spiritual self, blending with my higher self. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. I want to also celebrate your inner child, Miss Luther, and she's always welcome in all of our spaces. So I'm glad that you had that experience. And yeah, I want to come back to, I have one more topic before we wrap up, but I want to come back to the question of how do you think your Chinese culture and the Chinese heritage, what did you bring? I know, for example, as an immigrant, the Middle East is such a beautiful place, but there's also so many toxic things that I left behind and I don't like to incorporate.
Yeah.
But there is a big sense of community and gathering in the Middle East, where when I first came to the state, there is more focus on the individual. So I'm curious what kind of the Chinese culture aspects you are adopting and you're having with your practice or with your events.
I was just writing about this too. I was like, thank you.
A very timely question.
Where are you writing all that? I want to read all of this.
I will send it to you. Hopefully it will come out as this I don't think so, but it will come out at some point. I'm starting to write about my experience going back to China the last 1.5 years, how different it felt compared to living in California. Of course, but it was, as you asked, I feel like I was given a new lens of looking at my culture and actually digesting the gifts and blessings of having this lineage, having this culture as a mountain behind me. One thing I really start to appreciate about Chinese culture is the emphasis on harmony. Even though that could be a toxic part of the culture too, like conflict avoidant, and you just want to save face. But the lovely part is emphasizing harmony really comes from a culture that has witnessed the rise and fall of a kingdom or so many kingdoms of 5,000 years, and so many different ethnicities and cultures have lived on the land of China for so many years. And people have got to find a way to live with each other, to rule over these different ethnicity, different regions that speak so many different dialects, have so many different traditions. And I think the emphasis harmony is the essence that keeps people together, not just harmony with each other, with your family members, with other people in your neighborhood, but also harmony with nature, harmony with the seasonal rhythm, harmony with the elements. I really feel that this harmony came from an attunement to what's needed to by other people, from other people. That in Chinese culture, a lot of those attunement come from nonverbal caretaking. That could be toxic, but could be very sweet when your family member that just knows what you need, water, warmth, and because we caretake in each other without giving you, by just attuning to our senses and our more like subtlety of the relational field. And I think it's a skill that it's hard to cultivate, of course, without really getting to know each other and being part of a community. But it's also a skill I feel like Westerners doesn't appreciate as much because they overemphasize on expressiveness and communication. Sometimes I see overdone in California communities. I feel like that comes with the cost, which is the cost of needing to explain myself, of needing to be having everything very explicit, very strict and rigid. And I feel like a lot of times the tuning in and being with each other comes from those nonverbal spaces when we're not just talking so explicitly about what we're doing, our lives, what we're feeling, but sitting with each other, hugging, cuddling, drinking tea, eating, singing, right? And that creates a sense of affinity that you don't have to explain to let the other person know I care about you and you're welcome here and you're safe here. So I also want to incorporate more of that somatic attunement to the work I do as a therapist, but also as a facilitator. Previously, in my Michelle era, I was very big on authentic relating, sing, speaking. Now I want to blend those, the practice of explicit communication and the practice of somatic attunement. And I feel like Chinese people are the master of not saying things and feeling things. Oh, they sit on the other side of the extreme, but we can borrow that skill too. Yeah.
Kevin, do you have that experience as well?
I have no idea what you're talking about. None whatsoever.
Okay. I love that answer. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
I definitely deeply understand what you're talking about, and I'm very curious to see more of that in your facilitation. I want to transition to the last topic, and then I want to see if Kevin has any questions. But I know you're here back in California, back in the Bay, for you to start something new professionally. And I want people to hear about this because I know how important that is for you and potentially can be big change to bringing back to China. So tell us more about what it's your next professional.
They're not even paying me for marketing this thing I'm working for. Okay. But okay, I care about this and I do really value this work. Hoffman Process is a 7-day self-development retreat that's quite popular and established mainly in California, but they also have a center in Colorado that's been around for 50 years. And it's a quite intensive program. Sometimes people say 5 years of therapy in 1 week, which is kind of like that. Yeah. And they're bringing it to China. They're starting a new center in China. And I'm very excited to be part of the founding team of teachers that's doing this work, converting it to Chinese and bringing it to Chinese folks, because we all know that Chinese folks need it. There's very rare offerings of healing programs in China for especially this kind of childhood parenting or a child-parent relationship or early family of original work. The Hoffman Process really starts with that, family of origin, and then it expands to more areas of your life. And we are having our first Chinese process in China starting this January 2026, so it's coming very soon. So if anyone who is interested, because the waitlist for the California Hoffman Process is 6 months. If you ever want to do it in China, or if you speak Chinese, feel free to come over there. I think we have a fascinating team of teachers. They are really hardworking and enthusiastic. I forgot how Chinese people are so hardworking and enthusiastic after spending so many years in the West. I was like, oh my God, I don't have that work ethic. But I'm also very passionate about this work. So, yeah.
bringing a 996 focus to somatic and personal work.
Exactly. Yeah.
I was actually reading some of your writings before this interview here, and I hope I can bring this up. I want to read you a quote from one of your recent writings, and I'm curious to
Wow, people
to
quote
learn.
me now.
This is from your October Substack. Closing, so some of your closing paragraphs here. Working across East and West, I've learned that what many people need isn't more solutions, but understanding and trust in their body's wisdom, their own abilities, their soul's coherence. Different cultures give us different lenses. I'm choosing the lens that sees wholeness instead of pathology.
Yes, that's what I really stand firmly on.
How do we cultivate that trust? Because part of this article here was the intermingling, sometimes the binary clash between East and West, if you will. That's an oversimplification. I encourage everyone to read Xuel's beautiful or October Substack article. But I feel like if I can provide a sort of cliche, if you will, Westernism, Western psychology, psychotherapy, Western practices are focused on what's wrong, what's the pathology here. And it seems like your experiences in China, traditional Chinese medicine, they've offered a broader perspective. I'm just wondering, how do we cultivate that sort of that trust, that wisdom within ourselves? How do we allow that to come out of ourselves in a natural way?
I'm reminded of saying my own therapist told me when I was in the midst of my dark night of the souls before leaving the States, that I was like, how do I have faith? Which is similar question to how do we have trust? It's not leap of faith if you don't have a leap. It requires you to trust in the unknown to have faith. Otherwise, if you have evidence and you know it's going to work, then it's not faith. Yeah. And I feel like the way we can cultivate trust and faith is just lean in to any sense of joy and pleasure and satisfaction in our body. No matter where we are in any phase of our life or any time of the day, there is something that's giving us a little bit of pleasure and joy and ease than something else. For example, in this moment, if the noise in the street of Dolores Park is bothering me, I could lean into the music I'm playing in the house, right? So it's in this a split moment, we can see what's delighting me a little bit more. And then we can bring in the light of that delight a little bit more, expand it. I like the word double click on it. And trust that if we keep on double clicking on the things that give us some ease, joy, and pleasure, then that will be the very pathfinding that we could do for ourselves to be out of the dark tunnels and finally embrace the full blast of light. But of course, during the tunnel, you have to use your eyes, right? Where is a little bit of light amongst that pitch darkness? And sometimes the light is more of a sense insight. Sometimes we don't see it in our eyes. We can't plan it. We can view it. We have to find it in our body. And I think Chinese medicine really has taught me that there is signals and messages we can tune in and get it from the body. For example, eating certain foods, like which one gives you more joy and ease and satisfaction, which one makes you sick after. And those are the very choices we can make to cultivate somatic and social ecosystem that supports your becoming.
I want to end on this beautiful answer. Thank you so much for willing to do this and giving us some of your wisdom and your inner journey and experience. And thank you, Kevin, as well, for taking time from all life matters and being here as well. Thank you both.
Thank you all. It's such a delight because I've known you guys for so long.
Yeah. Thank you. All right.